Well, also with me to discuss the ceasefire deal is Angela Diffley, our foreign editor. And Angela, how different is this deal from Resolution 1701 that was drawn up after Israel pulled out of Lebanon in 2006?
Yeah, there is a lot of worry amongst particularly those who had to leave northern Israel and are hoping to go back, that their security would not be guaranteed. The differences are in 2006, when Israel pulled out, the people charged with making sure that the resolution was adhered to were the Lebanese army and the United Nations force. And they didn't really have the capacity, either the funding, and even the mandate was rather unclear. And they weren't really able to challenge Hezbollah's presence in southern Lebanon, even though that was part of the original deal that they were meant to go back above the Litani River. This time, the idea is that the international community will not walk away and wish people luck, but instead the US and France will play a much more active role in monitoring this thing and enforcing it. That is the hope. The other difference from Israel's point of view, because this war was started by Hezbollah firing hot rockets after October the 7th, from the Israeli, those in the north, their point of view, is that Israel will be allowed to go back in to Lebanon if it deems, and the committee in charge deems, that it's under imminent threat of attack.
And where do you think this agreement leaves Hezbollah and, I suppose, regular people in Lebanon?
Yeah, I know some people in our reports earlier there were saying, we return victorious. There is no doubt Hezbollah is massively diminished after this war. That is a fact. They have lost much of their senior leadership, much of their material, their equipment. They are a diminished force. Hezbollah are also in Lebanon, as well as having this, they are in effect a militia, which is bigger than the Lebanese army, or certainly was. They are also a very significant force in Lebanese society. They have a very strong hold on whatever happens in Lebanon. They have members of parliament. And because it is such a dysfunctional state, they, on many occasions, provide social services where the state is not working properly, particularly to the Shia population, some of whom are their support base. So suddenly all that has changed. And, will that mean there might be some kind of realignment in Lebanese politics? First of all, it's likely that at last a president can be chosen, because that was something Hezbollah was blocking until now. It's hoped that a president will be chosen. There are people looking at this saying, here is an opportunity for Lebanese society to realign, politics to be realigned. That said, this is a country of around 5 million people with very many different faith groups, very many different peoples. It is a very difficult country to run under any circumstances, because there are so many different communities. There are as many people who are very worried that there might be a civil war now in Lebanon. It's difficult to see where all this is heading. Certainly France, the US, for example, will be very keen to get in there, and presumably some key Arab countries helping rebuild. $8.5 billion worth of damage has been done.
Well, let's look to Israel then. We mustn't forget, of course, there are still Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. There are, as we saw in our report, Israelis who are rather lukewarm about this deal with Hezbollah. And, of course, the war in Gaza very much still going on.
Yeah, I think it's probably useful to note that we know that those on the far right of Netanyahu's coalition government were opposed to this. They said, we have Hezbollah on the back foot. We should crush them entirely. They were outvoted. But it is interesting that they did not choose to topple the Israeli government, which they could have done, perhaps. They didn't. And there is perhaps a feeling that, Israel wanted to make things a little bit easier for Donald Trump, and it might be useful to have a ceasefire. Also, Joe Biden might have chosen to instruct his people to vote against Israel, or certainly not to veto the United Nations on this ceasefire deal. So there were a number of reasons why it did get through, even despite far-right opposition. As to, the implications for Gaza, a ceasefire in Gaza would involve Palestinian prisoners being released. That is much more complicated than the arrangements for example, the ceasefire with Lebanon, with Hezbollah. That is a key factor. And also, it involves thinking about what happens next in Gaza. And Netanyahu has refused to openly discuss what the day after might look like in Gaza. And it's impossible to have a ceasefire until there is a clear answer to that with all the relevant people in the Middle East, putting in their penny's worth. It is being slightly resurrected, this idea. Do you remember the Abraham Accords, this idea before October the 7th that Saudi Arabia might normalize relations with Israel? That would never happen now without something very, very significant for the Palestinians. But people are now murmuring about a demilitarized Palestinian state going along with normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. All of that, of course, depends on what the Saudi Arabians decide to do. But even to be talking about it is surprising. That is down to Donald Trump.